I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to introduce my talk today. The theme is Kismet. And I had to think about my life and how Kismet sort of stuck its head in. So I thought about not just Kismet being a part of my life, but being sort of like versus my life. Like, I was born into a family where my mother... Oh, actually, you know what? Before I start, I guess I'll show you a bit of my work, and then I'll jump into my family life. This is where I am today, and then I'm going to lead up to stories of how we got here and where we continue. It's kind of interesting. When I was putting this talk together, I'm so used to interviewing other people, so I kind of forgot about my life. So thank you, Mark, for taking down memory lane. I do want to thank Amar and Mark for having us here today. I remember 25 years ago when I started my career, I didn't have a creative community, and it's so wonderful to see so many people supporting creativity. It's enabled so many things in my life, and I wanted to start literally when I was born. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a classical Indian singer. And they both wanted me to be an engineer, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or marry one of those things. And none of those things happened. But I remember a story from a young age that I'll share with you, and it'll sort of give a context of my life. When I was a kid, I used to get headaches a lot. And so my mom was a little bit worried, and she said, "Sharad, let's take you to a doctor, and let's just get things checked out just to make sure everything's okay." So I remember going to the doctor, and he sat with me and in a room privately, and then he called my mom, and he says, like, "Listen, he doesn't have a problem here. Let me tell you what he told me. At night when you go to sleep, he gets up, and he goes downstairs and watches television until late at night." And I remember my mom looking at me super like upset and like, "What are you doing?" And I can explain that today as I wanted to escape. I wasn't so great in school, and I was always compared to by my cousins, my family friends who were very academic, very smart, and I just wasn't one of them. So I wanted to escape. I wanted to be on TV. And so that's how I would escape. I was 8 years old at that time. So fast forward. That stigma of my parents saying you'll be an engineer stuck with me. I went to university or college. I probably failed out of every college in the Lower Mainland here. I never got into SFU, but it's nice to be on stage here. Truth. I was failing out of every engineering course that I was forced to take by my parents. BCIT, Langara, all these places, physics, math, it was like a big blur to me. And then I remember one day somebody telling me, it's like, Sharad, you talk a lot. You're really, and I really enjoyed speaking, public speaking. And they said, you should take a broadcast journalism class. And I was like, oh, what is that? And that was at BCIT, and I took one class at night school. And I remember the deal, because my parents had to pay for it. I remember the deal I had to make with my parents was like, this was just a hobby. I had to be an engineer. I was going to pursue that no matter what. And I remember catching that bug and taking that class at night. And it was one class, and I said, I'm hooked. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. But I remember in the back of my head, this was just going to be a hobby, because there was nothing else in my mind that said that I could do this as a career. And so I continued to do bad in school, and I then started to look at opportunities to volunteer, because evenings and weekends I was allowed to be a broadcast guy. And I also then said to myself, I'm going to volunteer for anybody who gives me an opportunity. And at that time, the only people that were giving me opportunities were people in the South Asian community. So there was East Indian television, South Asian television programming on Rogers and Shaw. Every weekend, evenings and weekends from 1996 to 2007, I was a volunteer. And I loved it. All that time, I had gotten married, I had gotten jobs, really cool jobs, but I lived for those evenings and weekends to interview people, to meet people, and to document people. I soon then auditioned for a TV show early on, I think 1996, 1997, just a prelude, which gave me that bug to know that I was actually made for this opportunity to interview people, ask questions. And I thought, what if it wasn't a hobby? What if this could be my kismet, my destiny? My dad and mom said no. And they continue to say no. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So I'm going to talk about, in my earlier days, I used to volunteer. And I remember going out socially in Vancouver. And we would go to a lot of events. And I always used to see this guy with a camera. The next day, I would see those same pictures that he was taking in all those events. And he would post a written blog and those pictures. And I was in some of those pictures. I was like, oh, who is this guy? Like, what's he doing? What's a blog? It's like 2007, 2008. And he knew that I was volunteering on TV at the time. And he came up to me. He's like, Sharad, I'm doing an online TV show. And I was like, oh, what's online TV? Like, I want to be on real TV. What's online TV? And he goes, I'll pay you if you want to host it. I was like, wow, someone's going to pay me to host an online TV show. So I said, sure. So I started to host these sort of vignettes where I'd interview bands or artists that were in the city here. I used to look at the camera guys in the back of the room. I would see how quickly they'd edit something. There was no time limit to this content. And they'd post it on this new social media channel called Facebook. And so I was like, I did the math and the little calculations, and I said, I could do this. I'm going to try this. And so I bought an iPad, I bought a camera, and I started going into my community. The same guy that I saw networking, I said, like, who was going out and blogging, I said, I'm going to do the same thing. So what I would do is I'd call people, cold call, literally. We didn't have, like, a lot of social media technology or email access at that time, for me at least. And so I would cold call people, and I'd ask, can I come by and interview you? And they're like, for what? And I'm like, oh, for social media. That's all I really knew what I'd call it, for social media. They said, sure, come on down. So I'd go in, and I'd actually take my cameras in, and I'd interview them, and then I'd have coffee with them right after. And I remember my dad in the back of my mind is like, this is just a hobby. This is just a hobby. You need a real job. So that same CEO, that same leader, that same interesting person, I would sit there and have coffee with them. They found my work, my interviews so interesting. And at the end of the conversation, I'd say, do you have a job for me by any chance? And they're like, no, you just came here to interview me or meet me, and I don't have a job for you. Why do you need a job? It seems like you're doing okay. I'm like, no, this is just my side gig. I need a real job, or my parents are gonna, you know. And so I started to take that idea, and I started to worry a bit. And so I started to really look for jobs, and I got really cool jobs, but I was miserable. Every day, I was waiting for the evenings and weekends where I could just go and start make-believe and play with content. During my networking, I met a gentleman named Chip Wilson from Lululemon. I really admired the Lululemon brand at an early stage, and this was like one of those guys I was like, I want a job with Lululemon. If I get a job, if I could go meet this guy, interview him, and Chip wouldn't take the meeting, but he said, you know what, let's just keep in touch. And I realized at the end of the conversation with him through email that if I ask this guy for a job, maybe he'll never talk to me again. So I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna put this one in my pocket and say, Chip, I'm just gonna keep in touch with you. I learned how to like sort of be a little bit more poised. I said, maybe one day we can do something together. And I want everyone to think about, as I'm talking about the stories I'm going to tell you, about where Kismet made its role in my life, and it might sort of resonate to some of the things that I'll share. So while I was volunteering, shooting these little videos and vignettes and posting them on social media, I caught the attention of a company. And this logo appears of a company called Blast Radius. And so Blast Radius was this, web design, sort of interactive, a digital company, one of the best of its kind, and its headquarters were in Vancouver. And so I remember one of their VPs reached out to me, and he knew me socially, and he said to me, Sharad, I really like the videos that you're making. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, can you give me a job? And he's like, no. Couldn't give me a job, but he said to me, he's like, we have a client that needs some video content. And we like the style of the videos that you're making. We like that you're in some of your videos, and we need them pretty quickly. I was like, I'll do them really quickly. So we sat in this room. It's my first client meeting I've ever taken as a volunteer, thinking, right, sitting there. And it was Microsoft. So Microsoft needed some videos for their solutions, and they said, we have the scripts. How long? We're going to give you a month to do them. And I was like, no problem. And Blast Radius said, we'll let you use our studio. So I said, great. So I went in one weekend, and I shot them all in like half a day. You don't tell that to your clients, by the way. I learned that as well. On Monday, and I remember them saying, Sharad, we're going to pay you for this work. And I was like, oh my goodness. I remember thinking to myself, this is an opportunity here. And I remember thinking to myself, how do I keep this going? So Monday, I handed in all the videos. I had one edit, and I got a check. And I said to myself, what am I going to do with this money? And so I bought myself another camera. And that started creating opportunities in my life, and started thinking to myself, maybe I could still make money doing this on the side while continuing on with the really random careers that I was facing during that time. Throughout my life, I want to talk about dates and times. Excuse me for a second. Think about dates and times in your life. Birthdays, what else? Anniversaries, special days. August 17th, 2011. So 2010, I worked with Blast Radius. Fast forward to 2011. It was August 17th. It's my brother's birthday. Early that morning, my wife woke me up, and she showing me a pregnancy stick, and she said, Sharad, I really want to tell you something special. We're having a baby. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And I think back 3 weeks before that. And 3 weeks before that, I remember my wife sitting down. She goes, people are starting to watch your content. That Blast Radius gig was really, kind of cool, but maybe you should think about education, further education. I was like, education? I was like, I basically failed out of every college in this Lower Mainland. I mean, where else am I going to go? And she goes, you go to Victoria. They haven't seen you there yet. She said, Royal Roads University will take you in if you have life experience. And there's a master's program. And I go, I don't even have an undergrad degree. I don't know how I'm going to get into this master's program. And so I applied reluctantly. I created a little website that I sent. I didn't know how to write stuff. I just knew how to create stuff. So I created some videos talking about my life, and I sent it in. And 3 hours after my wife told me on August 17th, my brother's birthday, that we're having a baby, I got a call from Royal Roads University. And if you know my history, I have unless I have shredded them, every rejection letter that I've ever gotten from university, I still, I just look at those sometimes just to humble myself a bit. Because I got a lot of rejection letters. But it was different this time. Joshua Gouillard, who was at the time the head of the Masters of Communications program, said, "We would love to have you in our program." And I looked at my wife and I go, "They're actually like accepting me." And I was like, I thought it was a mistake, but she goes, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." So I said yes. And I thought, I'm gonna call my dad. He'll be so happy. I got into my master's program, but it was different. It was something I wanted to do. It wasn't engineering, it wasn't the physics, it was the math, it was communication, which I really wanted to do. So that was a special day that took on a different type of trajectory, which I'll tell you more about. So part of my master's thesis, because I had to create a thesis, I didn't even know what a thesis was. I remember talking to a thesis supervisor, and she said to me, "So what is your thesis going to be?" And I was like, "I don't know what a thesis is. Like, tell me more about that." And she goes, "This could be something that you research. It could be something related to your current work that you could take further." And so I said, "Oh, okay." She goes, let's, and she said, sat with me. She goes, "Tell me more about your work." And she goes, "Well, I sit down with people, I interview them about their lives, and I put them on the internet." And she goes, "Oh, go deeper into that." And she goes, "Tell me about what happens when people see those videos." I go, "I don't know. I mean, maybe they're entertained by them. Maybe a little bit of vanity. People like to see themselves, or maybe they promote themselves." And she goes, "Oh, so how do people remember those people?" And that triggered something in my mind. And I said, "Oh, how do they remember those people?" So I thought back. So part of my thesis was looking at how I interviewed people, what I would do with the video content, and then when I put it online, how people would see that person. And I coined that sort of memory of that person, social media legacy. How you would remember somebody when you saw their picture, heard their voice, or saw a video of them online. I called that social media legacy. I was one of the first people in the world to actually use that phrase. And then, according to some scholars that I don't know if that was true or not, but they told me that this is the first time we've seen this. And so I was like, okay, or examined it. And so I said to myself, well, what about real legacy? What our family and friends know about us? And they're like, well, yeah, there's that too. So I said, what if I collided those? What if I took them both and started interviewing people about their personal legacy? And they're like, oh, that's a novel idea. That's interesting. Maybe people already do that. And then they said, well, how would you take it further into your current life? And so when I was a kid and I used to watch television, I was fascinated by celebrity culture. I was fascinated by people who were successful. And they said to me, well, what if you interviewed those types of people? And I said, yeah, that would be awesome. And so I said to myself, and I declared, I said it out loud. I said, I want the most iconic, interesting, fascinating, celebrity-type, successful people to be my clients, to make legacy content with them. There's another thing I'm going to share with you. Whenever I used to make those videos that I used to share with people, people used to ask me, hey, Sharad, we saw the final video. Is there was something I said that you didn't put in that video. Could you send that to me? I'm like, sure. That kept happening. Whatever was hitting the editing room floor, people kept asking for that content. And I was like, what if my business was about what nobody could see? What if I make private documentaries for the most successful, affluent, interesting, iconic people in the world? What if that was my business? And that is what we do at Human Biography. And I got that for my thesis. So this is me graduating with my wife. Sent that to my parents right away. They were super happy because I graduated. And I tell you, my wife has been such an interesting part of my life, and I'll tell you a little bit more of Kismet when it comes to her as well. But this was a point in my life that I kind of said to myself, I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm going to go pursue what I really wanted. I remember the day I graduated, so my son started walking that day, and we had our son Soren during the time that I had this business start. So this is 2014. 2014 was an incredible year. It was the year I turned 40. And it was, and again, Kismet again comes into play. So I was born October 26, 1974. October of that year, I was invited to come interview Ariana Huffington. So Ariana Huffington is an incredible journalist, a leader, thought leader. She's created so much opportunity for people who are in the creative fields, in the writing fields, and I looked up to her, and I used to network. So I said, hey, I'd love to meet this person, I'd like to interview them, and they said, oh, come out to New York. And that was the first time I learned to just fly. Go wherever the interview is. Take opportunity. And so I went to New York for a day, and I went and sat in the Times Center, watched Ariana Huffington do interviews on stage with the CEO of Campbell's Soup and all these interesting people. And at the end, I was brought into a room. There was 50 people, all waiting to meet Ariana Huffington. And she's like, oh, before I touch base with anybody, there's this gentleman here from Vancouver. He's here to interview me, so I'm just going to do this interview. So we sat in this little small room, and I got 7 minutes with Ariana Huffington. And I interviewed her, and I asked her 1 or 2 questions, and one of the questions was, what is your legacy? And I remember that has been the cornerstone of my work, is what is your legacy? And I want everyone to think about that today. It's not about what your legacy is when you die, but how you live. So, Chip Wilson, opportunity arose where I was looking at speaking on the TEDx stage, and I was like, I might not be the right person, but I know somebody who has a really great story who would love to hear. So Chip entered my life again in 2014, the same 2 weeks after Ariana, a week before my birthday. I remember sitting with Chip on the TEDx stage, interviewing him about his legacy. And I remember him thinking to myself, how did I get to this place right now where I'm interviewing him on stage in front of all these people? And I thought to myself, I just took a chance to introduce myself to somebody who could give me an opportunity. And in turn, we shared his story. And then His Holiness. That same week, I was invited to host the Dalai Lama for 3 days, document him, and host him in my friend's home for a few hours. And my wife, and so this is all the same month, right? And so my wife was super pregnant, ready to have our second child. I was about to turn 40, just did a TEDx talk, interviewed Ariana Huffington, and then His Holiness is here in the city, and I'm here to document him. And all these things started culminating. And I could probably tell you more stories about how this all happened, but I only have limited time, and we can have maybe a Q&A after. But I'll share some footage with you of that time. This is, I was also invited, oddly enough, how the Kismet keeps playing when you're open. Oh, I just want to talk about being open. That's me in a private home in Vancouver, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the founder of TED Talks. We flew in Chris Anderson from TED because Chris wanted to interview him, and I helped produce that piece. And that was like, I was saying to myself, how did this happen? How did this happen? And just being open to opportunity, meeting people, and bringing them in, and saying yes. I made no money doing this, but I knew that the opportunity was there, right? Because I didn't care if I made money or not. I just loved what I was doing. Here is a quick video of my wife getting blessed by His Holiness 3 days before our daughter was born. Yes. Now, there's a reason that's my daughter, Nola. She was born about a few days later. And I'll just say this, I couldn't show major shots of His Holiness because there's other people in the shots, and it was a private piece that I created for him. But my daughter Nola, I remember, and I'll tell you another piece. So when we were delivering Nola, we were in the hospital. My wife is in a birthing tub. And I remember no water had broken when my wife was about to give birth. And I don't want to be so graphic, but and my wife, I didn't bring that video, so it's okay. My wife was giving birth, and my daughter came out in the call, in sort of this beautiful bubble. And the midwife and the nurse looked at me and she said, oh, I've never seen that before. It's quite beautiful. And me and my wife look at each other and like, Dalai Lama. We just like, big up to Dalai Lama. I'm going to keep sharing. 2015. 2015, a good friend of mine, who's a developer, came to me and said, I really like your content. Could you make a documentary? I was like, maybe, I don't know. Always just thinking maybe yes. Because I was making short form content. And I said, sure. Elongate the interviews, add some B-roll. So I made a documentary with Emily Carr University, Stantec, which is a sort of a structural engineering firm here, the city of Richmond, and a developer in Richmond. And this documentary was going to talk about the education of public art practice in Vancouver. And I remember the opportunity. So everybody gave me funding, and part of the funding from Emily Carr University was they were going to give me a student. And so I said, okay. So I remember going to a media class to talk to the students and sit there and say, one of you is going to get to come and, sort of work with me and intern with me for this project. And only one person called me. He's sitting right here today, and he continues to work with me, Luke Pellizzari. Yeah. So that's a part of Kismet as well, is having the right people come into your life at the right time, and I've been very fortunate for that. And that was 2015. So this is 2016. As I toured around and started to travel more and started to interview more people, get more gigs, I was in the Silicon Valley interviewing CEOs of different companies. And the secretary outside one of the offices that I was working at, these little cubicles, said to me, "Sharad, do you know who Leslie Edwin is?" And I go, "Nope, never heard of her." And she goes, "Oh, well, she's here right now, and she's looking for funding for a nonprofit, and I think her story's pretty cool, so maybe you want to interview her one day." I was like, "You know what, I got some time. Just bring her in and I'll meet her." So this British woman with sort of like a heavy voice and very charismatic comes in, and she goes, "Oh, so I hear you're the storyteller." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Tell me about yourself." And she goes, "Well, maybe you'll interview me one day." And I said, "I've got 15 minutes. I put a microphone on her, because I just took a chance, right? She sat down, and I sat there with her for 45 minutes, hearing a story about Leslie Edwin's life. So Leslie told me a story about a documentary that she made called India's Daughter. It was about a rape case in India where a woman was gang raped on a bus, and she died after. And it was quite a powerful time in women in India rising against sexist values. And I grew up in India. As a child, I was born here, but I used to go there quite a bit and see only one side of it. This was a different side that I was being brought to light. And so I went home that evening and watched the documentary, and I called Leslie the next day. I go, "How can I help you?" And she goes, I was hoping that you'd say that. Let's meet for breakfast. We met for breakfast. And she said to me, "Sharad, I'm starting a nonprofit organization, which you knew, which we mentioned, and I'm trying to get more attention to it. And I would love for you. I've got to go back to London, but I'd love for you to be the director of the campaign." And I was like, "Wow, this is so amazing that promotes this." And she goes, "You're going to interview a few people." And I go, "Okay, great." So about 3 weeks passed, and she goes, "Listen, I've contacted the people. They've seen your credentials, and you're the guy." So the people that I was documenting were Meryl Streep, Susan Sarandon, and Helen Mirren. And you know when you have to just arrive and act as if? Imposter Syndrome hits in, right? And I'm still overwhelmed that I was able to do this. So I remember Luke and I getting on a plane, and we couldn't tell anybody that we were doing this for security purposes. Plus, these are very public people, and so we arrived in New York, and I remember I was ready to greet Meryl Streep in a private apartment. It was just me and Luke and one other person, and I was there, and I was like, "Luke, I just got to go to the washroom, and I'll come out, and Meryl should be here. We'll let her in." And I remember going into the washroom, coming out, and Meryl Streep is just standing there in the room. She's, "Hi, Sharon." And I was like, "Oh my God, she knows my name, and she's here." And I missed that whole welcome. But I remember that moment thinking to myself, how did I get here? And you just have to be present and act as if. Susan Sarandon, another great opportunity to connect with Susan. And I remember this was another occasion, and the whole campaign was shot in New York. So I had to go back to Vancouver, go back to New York, go back to Vancouver, go back to New York, whatever it took. And I remember Susan Sarandon was in we went to the penthouse of the Ludlow Hotel. She was, and you just have to get these people whenever you can get these people, right? They're not waiting for you. You've got to be ready for them. And so me and my wife are setting up these cameras in this little makeshift bedroom, and in the other room is Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis shooting a photo shoot for the 25th anniversary of Thelma and Louise, really cash. I could hear them laughing and all this stuff's on the bed, and we're sort of coming there. And then Susan Sarandon comes in. She goes, "Oh, you're here for the shoot?" I'm like, "Yep, it's nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah." And then Gina Davis sticks her head in, and she's like, "Oh, thanks everyone for the shoot today. You guys did great." She grabbed her jacket and all her stuff, where my stuff was. She grabbed it and she left, and I was thinking to myself, she didn't even know that I wasn't even part of that shoot, but I was like, those moments that you have in life, you're just like, okay, and then you have to work. Remember that, you have to work. So we did, and Helen Mirren, wow, what a legend, what an incredible woman. So kind, so humble, and another Kismet moment in my life. Chip came back into my life in 2016. He said to me, "You know what, I really like the way that we banter with each other. I gotta write a book. I was wondering if I could book you for a few hours so we could shoot some interviews, and then I could start writing my book." I was like, "Wow, that'd be great." 170 hours later. We shot many interviews, we created content that remains with them, and he created this book, Little Black Stretchy Pants, and that all started from 2008, and 2016, 8 years later, I was working with him, and he was my client, one of my biggest clients to date. And we're still great friends. He's a great mentor, and love him dearly. What year was this, Luke? This is 2019, so the year before the pandemic. We do a lot of work at the United Nations. We get invited to shoot interviews there. And I remember, if you look at these first two pictures, that's Val Kilmer, incredible human, super icon, and that's me in the center. Val was receiving an award that day. It was a Disruptor Fellowship. And alongside of him, to my surprise, I received mine in media that day as well. And I was there just to shoot interviews. Little did I know that I was also receiving an award. And I just say, like, you never know what's going to happen. It's funny because not a lot of people know me in this city, but when I went to New York and I got this award, I was like cheering myself on because I realized that and some people, I kind of used to diminish the things that I used to achieve because I thought, oh, I just got to like, just keep going, stay humble, like my parents would say. But you sometimes got to cheer yourself on. You got to sometimes celebrate. And this is one, probably the only award I've ever received, but I'm celebrating it still to this day. Thank you. To my, up to there, and 20, I mean, this isn't the only stuff we did, but these are some notable places that I really loved. So I think about things in my life. In 2014, when I documented the Dalai Lama, we brought the founder of TED Talks in, Chris Anderson. His wife, Jacqueline Novogratz, is the head of the Acumen Fund in New York. We had a chance to interview her, and that was quite fascinating as well. And then our great friend, Katy Perry. I meditate. Who meditates here? Strong. If you don't, try it. It works. My opportunity to meet Carrie and a lot of other people was through a great mentor of mine. My sort of the guru of TM, Transcendental Meditation, is a gentleman named Bob Roth. He's a CEO of the David Lynch Foundation in New York. We've documented him a few times. And he brought me to New York and our team to document Katy Perry at a private meditation concert and talk about access. Like, Luke, we were just all over the place with her. She's coming off stage, fist bumping me. I was like thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did I get here? And that was 2019. 2020, okay, let's talk about 2020. 2020 I thought was gonna be another incredible year. It was slow, you know. At the beginning of March, we were in Napa Valley. We were documenting some superhumans down there, and then we heard about this thing called COVID. And as I cough into my arm here. Heard about COVID, excuse me. And we were at the airport in SFO in San Francisco, and we started seeing people wearing masks, and I'm like, oh, I want to get out of this place. I don't want to wear a mask. And I remember coming back to Vancouver and not having very much work for the next few months. And so we started offering help to different organizations, Better Life Foundation, Battered Women's Support Services, to say, let's give you content. Let's keep ourselves going. Like, that mentality for me was, if I'm not working, I'm still creating, right? Because didn't need the money, I just wanted to do it. And we did. Soon we learned that people needed content. Video content became important. So we started working a bit. But I remember in 2019 meeting an incredible human. And I do a lot of work with indigenous communities. We met a woman named Aureen Askew. She's a DJ Osho she goes by. Aureen was on Squamish Nation Council. She was the Pride DJ. And she was also one of the main spokespersons for Black Lives Matter here in Canada. And she had this incredible story. She's an Afro-Indigenous Two-Spirit leader, and we did a documentary about her. It started winning awards, and that just showed me that we could still work locally. This is my family. I'm going to wrap up here because I know that we're limited for time. This is why I do everything. Some people ask me, what are the takeaways from all these people that you document? And there's 3 things. Family is everything, always be present, and everyone has a story. And this is why I do everything for. This is my company that we've created. We're constantly creating. We're interested in your story, stories all around, and please connect with us. And, excuse me, last story. This is a picture of Halloween when I was 8 years old, when I started watching television on After Hours. That girl right there and that boy right there, we used to visit them in Prince George, British Columbia, because my uncle was living up there, and we'd play with these kids. Little did I know that many years later I'd marry that girl. And that was, that's my Kismet. And I wanted to thank you all today for listening, and I appreciate you all, so thank you.
My name is Philip Chin.
I know you well.
I know you do.
Amazing talent, yeah.
Well, thank you. I totally enjoyed this morning. Your presentation just kind of blew me away. You had such an incredible journey in your life. I would like to know, what was the key moment you knew you made it, that you said, this is it. This is going to be my life.
Wow. I mean, at times I still don't know if I've made it because, I get that imposter syndrome. But I think it was, colliding the idea of education and my creative life and my academic life, because I kept rejecting education. And now that I have 2 kids, I believe education is very important. So that collision of graduating, having my wife really encourage me. So I think that was a great touch point of my career. Yeah.
Any women want to go first? I don't want to go dudes all the time. Here we go.
So part of my life is uplifting students and teachers, really humble people who are doing amazing things, but they don't self-promote themselves because they're in the trenches working.
Absolutely.
What would you say to them?
You have to take time to document the things that you've done. Like, I document other people, and I think this exercise, thank you to Mark, for allowing me to actually note down the things that you've done. Like, you have to almost, when I sit and interview somebody about their life, I literally start from the beginning. And you almost have to do that with yourself. I have these conversations with myself. I call it conversations with God when I'm on my headphones, but I'm not really actually listening to anything. I'm actually talking to myself, or I pretend I'm talking on the phone. You record those messages to yourself. You replay them. And sometimes it's an affirmation to yourself to say that you matter, you exist, and that you're acknowledged. And you have to do that with yourself first. So it's self-work, which I've done a lot. Yeah. So self-work. And then also sharing. And then, and it doesn't need to be blasted on social media. It's sharing with somebody who's your neighbor, your partner, your child, somebody who will listen. And I'm always here to listen. So anybody wants to talk, I'm always around. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Shiraz. We have met many times.
I know who you are, yeah.
I'm doing Grandparents Film Festival, and my question is about human autobiography, because I find that a lot of grandparents have wonderful stories, and there is a lot of technology. Do you think there is a possibility where it can be grandparents and grandchildren, anybody, who could tell their story and then put it on YouTube or somewhere, and then the invisible becomes visible. And then people around the world can say, yeah, I have this project, a similar project, we can form a network. Or because I did that once, where I had this project for every child born, 1 fruit tree for every grandchild born, plant
beautiful.
2 fruit trees. And then I got all over the world.
You have an orchard.
Yeah, I do it every day, every baby born. Thank you.
I'll just say this. First of all, thank you for sharing that, and I love and admire you so much. I think what I do with our work, when I started telling people, I want to interview you for your legacy or whatnot, I've not invented something. This is something that, it's time and tradition from Indigenous communities to my own community. We're sharing stories. I think from a digital standpoint, what is easy for everybody, we all have voice recorders on our phones, start recording. Daily thoughts, messages, small, long, short, whatever, and play them for others. Play a game on every Sunday. Every Sunday, if you're having dinner with somebody, pick a question that everyone has to answer and record it. Build on those questions. Create a digital family history for yourselves. That's a great way to start. Yeah. Thank you I hope that touched upon that. Yeah.
My family lost a number of people this last year, and getting my dad to record things for us, getting my sister to record, really key questions before she was gone. Yeah. Really powerful stuff. Really, and we knew they were dying. I love what you're saying. Like, let's just, as a society, as a group, as a family unit, whatever, let's just start to amass our own legacy.
Gathering.
Our own
it's so important.
legacy of who we are, what we stand for, what matters. One more? Do we have time for one more? You guys cool? Anybody have one really good question for Sharad? You did what? No, you're off the hook. No,
Just
no.
yell at me. Yeah. Oh, wait, here we go.
Hey, Sharad, thanks for sharing your story.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
As a parent and I guess default educator, what is your approach with your kids in terms of how they express their passions? And I know they're quite young still, but what's your approach to enforcing the engineering?
I'm definitely not my dad, but I send them over to their house sometimes to get them the discipline. I'm very easy. It's true. I'm very easygoing with them when it comes to creativity. I see they're both very creative, but they're also very mathematical, like my dad or like my brother. I think being open in conversation in our house. We're very verbose, animated. We have music playing all the time, just making sure we're having little dance parties and dance breaks. It makes things lighter, but being really open with conversation. I interview my kids every now and then. I'll take a camera and I'll say, hey, and then now they're getting used to the cameras around, so they maybe ask me questions more. But I think just being so open with conversation with them, like I can't, and I don't have the rule book on what is successful, what is not with children for sure, but I'm not going to be suppressing them in any which way to go in a direction that they don't want to, or a way that they want to go. Like I'm nurturing that. I'm giving them the tools definitely to make sure that they know we support them, we love them, but really like there's things that we've never even heard of that are happening today that are going to be the new jobs and the new careers and the new focus and the new creativity for tomorrow, and I'm all about that. Absolutely not. Yeah, no, absolutely not. I will not. And I'll show that to my dad too. I'm like, yeah, And I'll say this. I was a little bit. I am not hard. I don't want to be hard on my parents because they only knew what they knew when they came to this country, and they thought that was the way for success, and it has been for so many. And I respect engineers. It's not like don't. I wish I could wear that little ring on my pinky and say I'm an engineer, but I couldn't do that. And so I want to just say that they are the most incredible people, and they support me so much with what I do today. And they get apologetic about things, so they've sort of transformed when I was transforming as well. So we're all growing up together. Thank you. Yeah.